from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, Jeremy Sirota. Jeremy, he is the CEO of Merlin. The topic that we're going to talk about today is something new to the show, but it's quite interesting. We're going to talk about music a little bit, but of course, from a technology perspective. And this is why, I'm very pleased again to welcome Jeremy to the show. Jeremy, the way I love to do it, as I was telling you before we hit the record button, I keep it to my guests to introduce themselves. I have a theory. People introduce themselves better than other people does. So I'm going to keep it to you and I will pass it to you. So the floor is yours.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Mehmet. It's great to be here today. I'm excited to chat with you. I actually got my start in technology. I was a technology lawyer at first. I spent 2 years working at Meta on their music team there, working very closely with the technology teams and the product managers. But today, I am a CEO of Merlin. I've been here for 5.5 years. We are the digital licensing partner for independent record labels and distributors around the world. We have members in 70 different countries, including in the United Arab Emirates. The way your fans can think about you and those who listen to your podcast is we are like the fourth major. So you have Universal Music Group, you have Sony Music Group, you have Warner Music Group, and you then have Merlin. And the way I like to describe ourselves in a very simple, succinct way is we are the major for independence. So we help to ensure that independents can better compete by putting them on a level playing field. And so we do that through deals with companies like Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and then more innovative licenses with companies like Canva and Twitch, and ensuring that independents have access and can benefit in the same way that artists who might go through a major record company do.
Great. And thank you again, Jeremy, for being here with me today. Out of curiosity, what was the turning point to decide, you've been like a lawyer in tech. So what attracted you to lead Merlin?
So the very, very brutal, honest truth is complete happenstance. And I've always described my career as intentional serendipity. I went into law school, in fact, not so much to be a lawyer, though I enjoyed it tremendously, but for the opportunities it could bring. And I spent 5 years working at a major law firm and working with a lot of technology companies, a lot of early SaaS companies. And then we started working with entertainment companies. And that just kept snowballing till suddenly we were working with music publishing companies. And then we were working with Warner Music. And when I was doing work with Warner Music, it was on the digital side. I was helping them with their digital licensing deals. So that was some of their earliest deals with YouTube, but with a lot of very, very early tech startup companies in the music space. But I was primarily doing their outsourcing deals. Mm-hmm. I was primarily doing their technology deals. So I did their first deal with AWS. And I really got to enjoy the culture of music companies and what they were doing to support artists and people in the creative space. And so when I was looking to leave the law firm and go in-house and work inside of a company, Warner Music was in fact seeking to hire a technology lawyer. And so I suddenly had this best of both worlds. I could be the technology lawyer I'd always wanted to be, still be involved in tech, and then work in this company with a strong creative culture. And suddenly I'm working in music, a space I'd never expected to be in. Because most people get into music, they start off there. They manage artists, they're DJs at their local colleges, they're in bands.
Yeah.
I've always loved music, but I didn't have that same path. And what just continued to happen is I continued to find opportunities doing what I love with tech, whether working with tech or working with tech companies and still working in music. And so the pivot to Meta was really what exposed me to this larger world where I'd always had a global role at Warner, but it was global in more of a Western sense. Whereas
Yeah.
when I came to Merlin, it was truly global. Excuse
Mhm.
me, when I came to Meta, it was truly global. And I was working with labels around the world. I was working with teams at Meta around the world. And that really exposed me to this idea about this, um, uh, what was being called a collision, but I really saw as an opportunity for partnership between technology, companies, and people in the creative space.
Great. Out of curiosity, Jeremy, do you have any hobby in music? Like, do you play any instrument or something?
Oh, if my daughter was here, she would have so many answers for you. So two things, which is one is I'm completely tone deaf. Never take me to karaoke. Uh, I'm really bad at playing instruments, and I can never remember lyrics to songs. And I love singing. However, what I have learned in life is that your ability to be talented in something doesn't mean you can't support that. So I look at this and my complete inability to be musical, and I look at everyone who is musical, and I'm just absolutely amazed at what they can do. And what I've recognized is that my skill set, right, whether it's around business development, whether it's around complex partnerships, negotiations, trying to find paths through really complex disruption to industries. That's what
Mhm.
I'm really good at. And that's an area where I can then help people in this creative field where I have a huge amount of respect for to navigate that area.
Okay, great. So I'm like you. I'm I love music, but yeah, I can't claim any of this. I tried at some stage, but yeah. Now, um, of course, I was doing my own research and of all the public information available. So, Merlin represent around 15% of the global record music market. Um, so what Merlin brings to the independent music, like that the other labels, let's say, they cannot. So what differentiate, if that makes more sense?
It does. So the way I think your audience should think about Merlin is a bit of a unicorn, even within the music space. So what we do is we represent, and we call them members, and I'll explain that a little bit. We represent our
Sure.
members and their rights. So our members are a collection of labels and what are called distributors who distribute labels. And we have about 450 of them around the world. So that ranges from some very large independents, so someone like a Secretly Group. So they work with artists like Mitski and Phoebe Bridgers, to maybe some of the smaller labels. A great one is one who just joined from here in the U.S. called Polyvinyl Records, and they have a very small team, but incredible artists at the same time. Or take another one from the Netherlands, Armada Music Group.
Hmm.
That was a label founded by a DJ named Armin van Buren, and they're very, very strong in the electronic space. So each of these individually are relatively small, particularly compared to a major record company. Universal Music Group represents maybe 35% of the global market share. So individually, their ability to access the marketplace, to achieve premium deal terms on par with the largest rights holders in the world is very challenging. It's if not impossible. And so when we aggregate together as a collective, and we collectively, as Merlin, represent their rights with these large stakeholders, the Apples, the Spotifys, the YouTube, we can help them achieve more than they can individually. And so that's the role that we play, is that people join us. We're a membership. We're in fact owned by our members, which is
Hmm.
very unique. My board is actually comprised of my members. So many of the owners of these companies sit on my board. And so what that means for our members is that they know that their rights and their interests are being represented throughout the organization. And, we really look at our North Star as, are we empowering independence and are we celebrating music? And that's how we kind of approach our jobs every day. And it's a special, unique mission, and it's something we're very proud of.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned, Apple and Spotify, a couple of times. And, the biggest, I would say, innovation that happened, I think it's now, yeah, when the iPod came and, the way the licensing and the way people can get access legally to music was the big moment. So, let me know from your perspective, uh, do we have or do you see any inefficiencies in music licensing that you are able to solve through the technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you two answers to that. One is, and what I truly love about Merlin, we don't speak about it that often, which is why I was excited to come here today, is our entire company is fueled by 5 different bespoke platforms we built all in-house. And we have our internal CMS, which manages all of our rights. We have an external CMS for our members. We built our own, ETL system for royalty processing. So all these really massive files that come in from the services that we have to process. We built a data warehouse on behalf of our members so we can deliver actionable insights. And then, and this gets to the question you're asking, we built something called Merlin Bridge. And this is about solving for one of those gaps and inefficiencies in the marketplace, which is how can we better engage startups and scale-ups across the digital ecosystem? And what Bridge does, it solves for any number of challenges on an operational level. But before we even get to that, what we're really trying to solve for is startups, particularly startups who aren't in the music space, but know music can be powerful. They say, God, I look at music and I know it has this emotional connection, it brings this cultural cachet. I see it, it's ubiquitous everywhere. I have no idea how to license it. I don't know who to call. I don't know, even if I knew who to call, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know really how to talk to them. It's hard to get their attention, even if I wanted to. The rights are really complex. There's so many different rights across this. And then operationally, it's really complicated as well. And that's where Bridge, this technology we had invented to deal with gaps and inefficiencies, became the foundation for our initiative called Connect. And Connect, it's a little bit on the nose, the name, but the idea is, how do we connect music that brings all of those emotions and cachet and really can power a startup? And how do we bridge that gap to them to bring that and make that easier for them from a licensing perspective, from an operational perspective, just across the boards?
Cool. Now I gotta maybe ask a question which is kind of a cliche. Let me call it this way. In a industry which is kind of have a lot of legacy systems and contracts, right? How how is it possible to be innovative? And I know I'm asking this question because I know Merlin was chosen, by Fast Company as, the fastest innovative company. So, what does it take to truly innovate in such, people might look at it, yeah, like it's like all legacy contracts, what can be new here? So, what does it take to be innovative in that space, Jeremy?
First, it just takes everything looks impossible until suddenly it isn't. And one of the ways we love to approach our company is coming at things backwards. So, for example, I love to run bad idea days.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we have this problem, and everyone's going to try to solve it the worst way possible.
Yeah.
Suddenly, your thinking unlocks in totally different ways. And the history of the music industry is exactly what you just said, which is it's inaccessible, it's legacy, it's old, these are dinosaurs, it can't evolve. And sometimes the more you hear that or think that way, it just becomes this self-fulfilling truth. And so the first way that you approach this is simply to say, we are innovative. That's the mindset. And then you take it from there. They say, great, how are we going to innovate? And in fact, that's the way we did a brainstorming session that way. We said, let's come to the worst ideas of how to innovate as a company.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you're just unlocking mindsets. And so we then took that and said, okay, where are these gaps? Where are these inefficiencies? And that's how we started to throw ourselves at it. We started from a licensing perspective. Licensing is really complicated. There's so many different rights. So the first thing we said is, can we package all these rights together? And instinctually, the music industry said, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. And we said, no, how do we do it? The last slide of the deck is we have packaged all the rights together. Okay, now let's work way backwards. How do we get there? And so that's what we did from a rights perspective. And then we did the same concept from a technology perspective, which is despite everyone thinking maybe that digital is really easy in the music ecosystem, music's actually really challenging in digital. What I would say to the audience, for those who still remember CDs, CDs were really easy. You went and you printed a CD or you printed a CD, you put it in one of those little plastic jewel cases, you slipped a little insert in there and threw some shrink wrap around it and put it on a truck. Because that's the whole history of humanity, is building physical products and taking it from one place to another. And then you get to digital, it's like shockingly really complicated, because you're delivering these really complex rights formulations with lots of different data and binary assets. And I don't know why every single time I look at it, I say this should be easy, and it's not. And so this is what we did. We simplified everything. We just said, our goal is to make this as seamless and easy on a startup as possible. They need to invest their capital and resources into building their company, growing their, opening their funnel for customer acquisition, probably pivoting their company and what their product is 5 different times. So figuring out how to take assets from music companies is not their priority. So we used to have these really complex integrations with platforms, which we still do for mature platforms. But we said that's not what they should do. They should just have a simple API pull. So instead of a push, we now have a pull. So simple. It's just, but it's flipping it on its head. And that's why I always say you got to start with what are you trying to achieve? So we have an API pull instead of a push. And suddenly all they need to be able to do is manage webhooks. Almost any startup can do that. And they can't do that. They probably shouldn't be starting up their own company in the first place.
Yeah.
So we removed any sort of integration they have to do. And then so that was number one. And then number two is we normalize everything. So all this data comes in, and you would think it would all be in the same format, delivered in the same files with the same information. It is not. And so this is what Bridge does before it gets to Connect, is it comes into us and we built all the validation rules to normalize all this content. So when a scale up or a startup comes in and they've been licensed and we give them their token, it all looks the same to them.
Mm-hmm.
They have all the data they need to be able to access it in the ways they need to. And so that's what we've done, is on the member side, we've created this really great validation system and easy delivery system for them to get content to us. And then on the licensed startup side, it looks super simple and normalized to them. And that's sort of it's so simple, but it's so innovative. It just does not exist really within our industry.
Yeah, really innovative, Jeremy. Like when I'm okay, I come from technical background, and yeah, absolutely. And digital is, as you said, it's really, really challenging. It's not easy, and this is gonna kind of I gotta bridge to the next question, and it's good the conversation is flowing this way. Now, I can ask in one question, but I don't want to load the question. So, in the age of Reels and TikToks, right? So, how more complex or more hard it become when doing the licensing? I'm not asking AI yet. I'm keeping the question for another question. Let's focus on what happens in in these social media platform. And I remember I've seen like a lot of you know artists, I would say, and even sometimes podcasters, like, hey, you're taking my content, you're using it in your reels and in your TikTok. And so how that is handled, or do you have a solution for that?
Yeah, so I'll approach it in two ways. I'll talk about our initiative, and then I'll talk about the industry generally, because I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like people are interested. Uh, so for what we're doing, we're not trying to deliver 10 million, 50 million, 120 million tracks. I mean, I've lost track of the number of tracks that are out there of music. What we're trying to do is deliver a curated catalog of really interesting and engaging and quality music. There is an age in which, yes, you need a full catalog. If you're a streaming service, a music streaming service, you're going to want mostly a full catalog. If you are not necessarily in the music space, you don't need a full catalog. You need a limited catalog of good music, curated music. And that's what Connect's trying to deliver. So the issues you're describing are not going to exist within Connect, because we are specifically curating. Our goal is to be able to provide everything a startup needs, to be their exclusive provider. And I'd love them to get to the next level so they succeed and they want to expand who they partner with. But the issues that you're referring to don't exist right now within what we do. And if it was going to, once again, what we're doing at that Connect level between the members and the startups, is by normalizing all that data, it helps them to have clarity about rights, who controls and owns what's rights. In the larger industry, this is a big problem, especially for these larger platforms that don't build a CMS, where that allows for rights management within the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so important and critical, especially within these social platforms, to build that very early and to build a mature platform very quickly, because otherwise you get exactly what you've seen and you're referring to. You get a Wild West. And it may not even be that that's what they intended, but the lack of investment means that's what they get. Because if they don't provide clarity around what you can deliver, if they're not vetting content that's coming in, if they don't have a means of better controlling who's claiming what, then you have the exact problems that you reference. And when you're dealing with, 100+ million tracks of music, split rights, right? In the music industry, you can have split rights. Someone can manage and control rights in one country, and a different entity can control them in another country. So that gets complicated as well. And then it's one thing when you have, say, a Instagram stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instagram stories, it's Instagram itself who's making that music available to the user to add into their stories.
Right.
But when it's uploaded with the music already embedded, it starts to get more complicated. And this is where you need sophisticated systems to identify what the music is, identify who owns or controls it. And then the third layer is some sort of CMS that allows for people to dispute rights and to figure out a resolution around that.
Yeah, to your point, it's a Wild West. Yeah, but yeah, it is what it is. But now, this is I'm more curious about this one, AI, and I'm
Mm.
gonna ask the question in two parts. So first of all, I know there's a lot of debate from both, art perspective and technology perspective. Do we consider a music generated by an AI model, whatever, a piece that can be copyrighted, right? The second thing is how musicians and artists are looking, like, are they worried about AI generating music and, saying like, okay, if an AI can do it, what's the point for me to, I don't know, to go for, a company like Merlin or whatever. So what's your point of view on this?
Two good questions. So on the first question, there is a lot of open debate right now. So for example, here in the US, just a couple weeks ago, the US Copyright Office came out with a preliminary opinion that about the training of music and
Mm-hmm.
whether that requires a license to use. The UK is having this debate about it. In South Korea, they're having this debate about. In Japan, there's been opinions. So what you see right now is that there's all sorts of views around this, around whether this represents true music, whether this is copyrightable, whether it requires a license to create these LLMs and these models. So what I would say is that number one is, most importantly, if you want to create some sort of model, train some sort of model on music, on copyrighted materials, people have invested their experience, their emotion, their intuition, their humanity into it. That requires a license. Point blank. You need to pay for that. We know that within this space, there are plenty of folks out there training models on production music, which is, sort of more what I would, for lack of a better way of describing it, more generic music.
Mm-hmm.
The models are materially better when you use quality music, when you use music from well-known, established artists. And we also know that when you use music from independent artists, the model is even better. And the reason why is because independent artists have always looked around the corners. Right? The ways that they express themselves through music is more unique. The labels who represent them typically are more open to them exploring different types of genres, different ways of using music to express different languages. And so my view around that is that the models require a license because the value is tremendous that they're getting from it to create these. And then the question of whether the outputs should be copyrightable is a challenging one. And I'll just give this sort of the two sides of this sort of binary, two sides of this this line. So on one side of this, you have what I would call just the simple prompt produce music. I go in, I say, create me a new jazz track that sounds really cool. And a second later, it produces a track. I don't find that to be particularly creative. I don't find that to be establishing any level of expression that copyright law was intended to protect. That's one extreme. Right? Someone could do that and pump out thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tracks every day. On the other side, you have someone who is using AI as a tool. And they're saying, well, I want to create this interesting track, but I can't decide if I want a cymbal, if I want a horn sound, and they want to scroll through 100 different types of sounds really quickly in a format that they've devised. And in that way, it's more like a advanced Ableton or GarageBand or BandLab, right? Just the ability to explore different sounds really quickly, or to grab a sample to drop into a song they're creating. I don't know, maybe there's some, but I can't imagine anyone having a problem with that and having a song that has some level of AI produced samples or backtracks that are within a song. between those two extremes on this line, somewhere they cross over and people start to feel better or worse about what's happening. And, you know, the second question you then asked was, how do artists feel about it? There's two views about this, which is really expressing those two extremes. One is on a tooling perspective. Many are quite excited and they see the value of it. No different than any tools that have ever been developed within the music space to allow them to better express who they are as musicians. And then on the flip side, there is deep anxiety also about being displaced. And this is where you get to a question around, at a cultural level, the importance of music or any cultural output, writings, art, anything within this realm has always driven humanity and civilization forward. It's always allowed different groups to express themselves in ways. And that kind of strikes at an area of what do we want as a civilization? And then you come to the final point, which is absolutism can't rule. In the same way that artists and the folks who represent them, whether labels or companies like Merlin, this is not going away. AI is foundational in the same way the internet is. This is not Web3. This is not NFTs. This is like a middleware layer that's just going to exist. And that has to be acknowledged and recognized. At the same time, AI companies and folks in this space need to recognize that this requires consent. This requires attribution. This requires compensation. And so we, as an industry, as a music industry, and as a tech industry, have to find a way to bridge our positions to find a symbiosis between those two. And I always just kind of lead with, music is the best expression of humanity. We cannot lose that. That is really, really important for us. And so how do we bridge the gaps between positions?
Absolutely. And this is exactly what I wanted to say. Like, music is one of these things that actually the people who makes music, like, they make it out of some feelings they have, right? Maybe they are happy, maybe they are sad, maybe they are in love, I don't know, maybe they are angry. And it, whether it's the lyrics or the music itself, right? So it's like both sides. I'm talking about songs in usual. Yeah, it might be music alone. Um, if you ask me, do you want to listen to a music made by AI? I would say maybe it would depend. If maybe it's something like a track for lo-fi, I don't mind maybe, right? But if it's, something like I like classical music. No, I want to hear it from someone who actually did it and felt it, right? So, or maybe a pop song. Like, yeah, I don't want a chat GPT written song, right? So, and someone made music out of it. So, yeah, as I think, as you said, Jeremy, it's like it's a responsibility of both industries to, and again, the consumer would judge at the end. We've seen it, like, people who didn't like also the art generated by AI, which is very possible today. Movies, I know, like, there's a lot of debate, like, yeah, people in Hollywood, they're gonna lose their jobs. If you ask me, I don't think so. As you said, I liked, when you said AI is a tool, and this is what we repeat across all industries. Like, AI is just a tool that can give us some power, but yeah, uh, anything that is artistic and has some music is also innovation, right? So you're just creating something that didn't exist before, or maybe you're like just adding different flavors and coming with something new. So absolutely, to your point, I agree with you, Jeremy, on this. Now, if I want to ask you about um, because you mentioned tech and culture and what's happening in other industries, what kind of, like, similar parallels you see between what you are doing at Merlin in the music and what other industries are doing, like, for example, in media, or maybe, I don't know, like deep fintech, SaaS, shifting towards like platform-based enablement, what you're seeing in that space, because also, like, you have the experience, Jeremy.
Oh, okay. That's a broad question, but let me see if I can tackle it a little bit. Uh, the best answer I can give, and this applies to technology companies as well, is that we're all dealing with disruption and upheaval. And whatever worked yesterday may work tomorrow, or it may not. And I always get asked, how do you plan for 5 years from now? Like, first of all, 5 years is over. We're now talking about 3 years. But the second is, I couldn't tell you what's going to be next. If I did, I would be investing my money, which I don't. So that's a sign that I don't know what's next. What I do know is that the most successful companies do two things. One is they recognize that as much as things are changing, there's plenty of things that are not changing. And so if you go back to first principles and you just always start to ask yourself, what is not going to change? We just did this exercise with my company. I did an exercise at my 5-year mark. Is there what has changed in the 5 years since I've been here and what has not changed? And it's very illuminative about what you need to be doing from investing your resources and your time at your company. So that's the first way that I approach this, and I think tech companies should approach this as well. The second is, if you acknowledge that you're not quite sure what's going to come next, then you're trying to build a culture and a mindset that can manage whatever comes next. Right? How do we adopt these very flexible ways of working? Right? How do we create process and automation? How do we create more efficiencies to free up our time to spend it more around thinking versus doing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so much of how I've approached Merlin for the last 5.5 years, is building that space to be more proactive, empowering people from at all levels, right? How do you eliminate bureaucracy? Really, that's what I mean. It's not the greatest, but that's really what it is, right? I want to remove approval levels. I want to allow people to just operate and make decisions. And I want them to know what matters. What are our cultural values? What is our mission? What are our company goals? So that when they're making all these micro decisions every day, they're making them with the right perspective against them. And so anytime you look at any industry that's being disrupted, and that includes tech, right? Whatever tech company comes along today that disrupts, the entertainment company of old, they're just as likely to be disrupted themselves, because if they can do it, someone else can do it to them. And that's where these sort of two approaches have play more value in trying to prepare yourself for the future, as opposed to trying to predict what's next. That's not my forte. I'm very jealous of people who can do that. I am not the Nostradamus of the music industry.
No, so, yeah, let me tell you something, Jeremy. When I started the podcast and, having guests from different industries, the traditional question that usually used to come at the end, oh, like, what do you think the trends that would be there in the next 10 years? I stopped asking this question for the same reason you said, because there's no 10 years, there's no 5 years, to your point. Like, I don't know what would happen in 3 months from now, right? So, um, and I think at least I've been, old enough to witness that I never saw something going so fast as the times we are living now. You talk about something today, after 3 months, no one talks about it anymore. It's obsolete. Although some people will tell you, hey, like, this is the next big thing, and they disappear. And all vice versa. People say, no, this will not work. Like, people will not embrace it. People will not adopt it. And you see the opposite happening. So to your point, even myself, I stopped asking my guests about this. But at least, I started to call it seeing patterns more than predicting futures, and probably saying, okay, the logic says this might happen. It's not like would happen. So, and thank you for mentioning this also, Jeremy. Like, it's like really, um, I would say insightful. Now, if as we're coming almost to the end of our conversation, what do you think tech leaders, founders, especially in the tech industry, they need to do to be able, especially if they are also, targeting creators, right? So what do they need to do differently today to make sure that they succeed?
Oh, I feel like you just slipped in a question about the future there. But that's okay. I like that. That's a good question because I just want to riff on something you said earlier about pattern recognition. People expect that they should be intuitive from the get-go. But in fact, intuition is built from experience, which leads to pattern recognition, which then leads to intuition. And people always start the reverse, thinking they should be intuitive. And no, don't trust your intuition at first. You don't have enough experience to know enough yet. And so one of the great things that many tech companies do and do well is that they A/B. They spin things up quickly, they test, they try to get signal quickly, and then they move on if they don't. I think it's incredibly powerful. Here's what's missed from that, is that if you're just looking at quantitative KPI data, you may miss the signal. And if I was so many tech founders come from an engineering background, or maybe were product managers at one time, and so much of what they're told is find the data. And yes, of course, if no one's using a feature, that's pretty good signal. You don't need much more else from that. But so much of the most successful tech entrepreneurs are ones who look at some preliminary data and see a glimmer of a signal. And they realize that it's not that the feature or the product doesn't have fit. It's that we have not rolled it out the right way. We have not invested enough resources into it. And so what I would say to tech leaders is spend more time building that experience to get that pattern recognition, to get an intuition, because otherwise you're going to A/B test yourself out of a job.
Great. It's a good advice, and it's not about the future really. It's about like sharing the experience. And I think, Jeremy, you already shared a lot of wisdom with the audience today. The traditional, now it's a traditional fine question: where can people find out more and get in touch?
Yeah, you can find us everywhere. We're Merlin Network. That's with 2 N's. And we're on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. We're still on X. You can find us on the web at merlinnetwork.org. I'm findable across the web everywhere. People are welcome to get in touch with me. I'm quite responsive, in fact.
Great. I will make sure that the links are in the show notes. If you're listening on any of your favorite podcasting apps, so you'll find that in the show notes. Jeremy, really, I enjoyed the conversation. I learned something new also from you about, this specific area, which I didn't touch on my podcast before. So that was very good. Also for me, a great chance to learn. And I'm sure, the audience will benefit a lot from it. And usually this is the way I end my episodes. So this is for the audience. If you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, please give me a favor, subscribe and share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming back, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all your feedbacks. I appreciate all your questions you ask me sometime. I'm really humbled because what you are doing for the podcast this year, 2025, is really big for me, at least. And it cannot happen without first my guest and second you, the audience, because we are getting in the top 200 charts of the Apple Podcasts across multiple countries, which is make me like very, very, very grateful for all the audience. It cannot happen without you. So thank you very much for this. And as I say always, stay tuned. We will be again in a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.